Welcome to Resilience This Week. And I am really pleased to have another special guest this week, Suzanne Dudley Schon. And she is a life and leadership coach. I'm really excited to bring her knowledge and her wisdom on tapping into our innate wisdom, because she's really got the goods. So welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Stacy. I really appreciate it.
Well, give us
it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's really exciting because we just really connected, and I'm like, I have to have you here. You've got to share this information. So give us a little bit of background on yourself. Tell us what you do and some of your background on why this is important to you.
So I'm a life and leadership coach, and I came into it from a real passion for how coaching works, because it's a positive, strengths-based kind of modality. And to me, in a lot of ways, there's so many people that might be in therapy that actually might be better served by a coaching model where it's really like, where are you now and where are you going forward? You know, how can we get you there?
Right.
And what's interesting about it is, for my own journey, it was also critical to use sort of that coaching model, because my past was laden with stuff that was a lot of landmines.
You're going to share some of those landmines.
So when I saw your website and this on emotional resilience, I thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what is so meaningful to me. And actually that I wrote my way through recovering from an emotionally abusive relationship with my ex-husband.
Yeah.
And it is such a complicated dynamic and puzzle to solve. So when you're in it, it's slow to happen in a way, that this erosion of yourself takes time in a way, and you slowly recede, readjusting boundaries so that it's incremental and you don't really notice it happening. And then I found I was living this really tiny life, not capable, not doing the things that I normally did. And I was like, how did I get here?
That is it's like universal for everybody who is in, it's like at some point you pull your head up and you're like, how did I get here? What in the world happened? You know,
Exactly.
You're not a bad person.
Exactly.
It's just crazy.
And you have been, it's almost like a weird, slow brainwashing where you no longer really know who you are. And so what I so value about what you do with your work about writing stories, people writing their stories, is exactly what I did. I actually started with poetry and journaling, and then ended up by creating my own book about that. It was sort of a process that was really instrumental in my being able to sort what I believed, what I thought, what do I actually like, who am I again? Because that whole sense of self was so eroded.
Yeah. You know what? It's like I mentioned, it's universal. It really does. You are a human being, but when you get into this type of emotionally abusive relationship, I love the word eroded. That's exactly, it erodes away who you are. Now, who you are is still there. It's just hidden, right?
Yeah.
But it's so hidden. It's so hidden from yourself, even from everybody else, but also yourself. And that's what I love. What writing does is it really releases that, and you can become authentically you. I remember one of the things that I always used to be so in awe of, people who could feel like they're authentic and they can be themselves. And it was usually older women who had been through lots of experiences. And now I'm an older woman who've been through lots of experience. I'm like, I get that now, but it's possible, even if you're younger, to be able to be yourself and be comfortable in your own skin. Right.
Yes,
so tell me a little bit more about your recovery and getting out of that relationship. And from your perspective, what's the trickiest issue of recovery from emotional abuse?
That's a great question. it's so tricky because I feel that part of what is something that helps you survive an emotionally abusive dynamic is the thing that also imprisons you.
Yes.
And furthermore, that same thing is also something that you usually really like about yourself. For example, your compassion and your ability to do for others, and not people pleasing per se, but really being someone that's generous and thinks about others' needs, sometimes ahead of their own, like you would as a mom and so forth. And so when that thing that is sort of part of your identity and how you are as a human, if you're naturally empathetic and loving and generous, and that gets used against you to like put someone else's needs ahead of yours, for example, in a kind of narcissistic relationship, or when you've eroded your confidence and so forth, and you're allowing someone else's rules to dictate your own, then it's so confusing. So the things that you and that keeps you surviving because that person is counting on you doing for them first.
Right. And it's something to be almost proud of, that you have these, that you are compassionate. Other people aren't compassionate. I'm a compassionate person. And so it's a sense of pride that you have that, but you're right. It just keeps you hooked in there.
And it's the only thing that you feel good about. Like, I'm good at doing that.
Yeah.
That self-sacrifice thing is like how you win reward from the abuser and for yourself. And then to then give that up is really hard. And because it helps sort of save you in the relationship. So it's so hard to sort of pull that apart and slow it down to be able to then, once you're sort of on the other side of when you're physically not in that dynamic anymore, if you're able to be removed and kind of relearn this relationship to yourself, then you can figure out, am I doing this act of love or generosity or compassion from love, or is it from fear or habit? Like, and that to me was one of those things, like slowing it down, really, like, instead of it being a reaction, was one of the helpful tools specifically with that.
And for me, I had to get to the point where, you know what, I guess I'm a bad person. I can't take this anymore. I guess I'm not going to be compassionate. I'm a bad person. And then once I got through all that, I'm like, wait a minute, and I'm a great person. I have amazing qualities. That was what kept me there. And that was not a healthy compassion. There's healthy compassion and unhealthy compassion. It was unhealthy. And in fact, I had a counselor tell me it's almost arrogant to feel like you can help that other person when they can't help themselves, or when, and I had to turn around and look at it that way. It's like, ooh, yeah, maybe I had to do some deep introspection. And so in order to heal. So I am curious what you feel like, because you work with clients and you've had your own journey to, like, I don't know, for a better word, fix this, but anyway, like, get to that resilience and access that resilience that they really have, and that they are a really great person, but yet released from those chains.
That's a great question, and we're all trying to figure it out all the time. And the things that I have found, both through my own journey and through working with clients, a lot of research in neuroscience and somatic work, like the work of Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine, that really we are an incredible resource for ourselves. That yes, great therapists are very helpful, no question. And but that we have in ourselves a great deal of wisdom through the body, which has so much information, so that often we forget to tap into. And there's all of this interesting stuff that Peter Levine's work in particular, where memory and trauma in particular live in the nervous system.
Right.
And so that if you're able to slowly release that, then you're freed up more. And those methods of release and activating your resilience can come through creative self-expression, through dance, through movement, through writing, through artwork, and through the body. And that is that, because if you're going through the prefrontal cortex and just talking about it, you can kind of re-traumatize, and that's not where the trauma lives. Those are memories and that sort of things, and actually kind of activate the physical system. So when you work from that midbrain, the mammalian brain, where the dance and the amygdala and all that stuff reside, you can actually release that trauma and access that strength that you have in there that's, as you said, sort of covered over. It's not gone, it's just hiding.
Now, let me stop in and give hope here to pretty much everybody out there. Does everybody have some innate strength? Or does everybody have something that they can find if they dig far enough that's good?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Everyone has it. And one of the ways to do it is simply by checking in physically with the body, like putting your hand on your belly and one on your heart, and simply asking yourself, after some quieting breath, because also, like, when we're all activated, it's hard to access that inner body wisdom. You do even the most lowest and low times of myself, when I could be safe, of course, feel safe, and tap in and ask myself, well, what do I need to do here? What's the next right little step to take? There was always an answer there that was available. And so every client I've ever had has been able to access that.
I love that. So you can just stop, and this is kind of part of that slowing things down, maybe, right? Slow it down and just pause and just, like you said, check in, take a breath. Even now, I forget to stop and check in with myself sometimes, because I've gone through like a week and a half of like a lot of stress over different things. And yesterday or day before, I stopped and I breathed, and I just was like doing some mindfulness thing, like, why have I forgotten to do this? So you can always go back to it as well. But so when you do, what are some ways that you can then just say, okay, what is that next step, or know what wisdom that you have in there?
Ways to access it? Well, as I said, the simple technique for hand on the chest, hand on the belly, that's when I'm doing some breath work so that you slow the mind down and can listen differently to the body. So there's two really great breathing techniques that I can suggest. Okay. One is where you do an 8-count inhale and a 10-count exhale. Okay. And doing that for even just 1 to 2 minutes can downregulate your system to make you able to listen to that other part of yourself rather than just the quick mind brain thing. There's another breathing technique called box breathing, where you have an inhale for 4 counts, you hold the breath for 4 counts, then exhale for 4 counts, wait before you inhale for 4 counts, and inhale for 4 counts. You do that for a series of minutes, and it calms the whole system down. It's amazing. The breath alone can help us get into our bodies and listen differently. We, as another colleague of mine likes to say, this is our wise dome that we actually have access to all the time.
And what that does is it activates, what is it, the parasympathetic nerves,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Exactly.
vagus nerve, which is like, it pretty much is connected to every nerve in your body, right? And just calms that down. And then
Right.
I think when you start doing that, you become clearer in your thinking, right?
Absolutely. Because when when the vagus nerve is that one that's responding to the fight, flight, freeze, or submit primal reptilian brain response, right? Where we go into complete survival. And part of that survival is the prefrontal cortex that's making all the executive decisions and thinking is actually deactivated so that you can survive and have all of that, like adrenaline, I can run away from the tiger and so forth.
Right.
And then, so as exactly as you said, as you've calmed the nervous system down, then you actually have clear thinking. And that's true thinking, not just reactive thinking. And that same thing that you mentioned, the constructive compassion versus one that is not constructive or destructive.
Right.
Unhealthy.
Because a lot of times having boundaries is the best thing for that other person. You don't see that at the time, but having boundaries is amazing. I wanted to say one more thing about the vagus nerve as well. Gosh, now it just left me. Oh well, we'll get back to it in a minute. It'll come back. But yeah, just having that clarity is like really. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Have you ever had an instance where you look back at some point in your life and you said, why in the world did I do that? You know, why did I make that decision? Or what, you were probably in that fight or flight, making those decisions in the reptilian part of your brain and not the executive function. And so that's another reason, like why you really want to stop, slow this down, breathe, and get that executive function working back for you, so that you are making really smart decisions for yourself now, but also for your future.
So. Yeah, you bring up such a great point. And we have a tendency, of course, to look back and say, why did I do that? And be a little harder on ourselves. And I would say that that's another opportunity to really apply self-compassion and self-forgiveness, and actually realize and honor the fact that you did survive. You did the very best you could, and you were activating those primal responses, and that's okay. And in fact, it was critical to your survival. So it's okay. And I do think that that's another level of healing and accessing resilience, because you have to trust yourself. Like, I actually did the right thing in the moment, rather than from my place today, oh, I would have done differently. Well, you have different things available to you that
you're looking back with older, wiser eyes.
Exactly.
You've got, have some self-compassion. What are some things that, other than maybe breath work, that people can do to activate this sense of trusting yourself again, or you're reestablishing, your sense of self?
Another great question, because that is the thing that's sort of gone. You're like, who am I, and how can I trust myself when I made bad decisions in the past? So one of the things that's super interesting, even in the I Ching, they talk about all conflict is ultimately based in self-conflict. And that in order to move past that, you have to marry yourself. And so I often will literally lead a client, and I've done it for myself, like, I have to go through courtship again with myself. So finding out what you like, not the other person, and putting yourself and your needs a little higher on the list. It takes a lot of effort to actually put yourself at the top. So even just go for, I'm going to be third on the list instead of at the very bottom. So patience is very important. But if you were in relationship with someone else, how would you go about getting to know them again and liking them and trusting them? What's involved with that? So asking yourself, oh, well, how would we like to spend today? What do I need today? And reestablishing that little dance with yourself is quite profoundly shifting.
Yeah. Getting to know yourself again, because when you're in one of these relationships and yourself becomes so small, like a tiny speck, you don't even know. I remember once I got out and I was trying to make a decision of what to have for dinner. I didn't know what my likes were anymore.
Yes.
Or I was trying to go to a movie. I'm like, how do I decide what to go to a movie? And for so many years, a decade, what I wanted to see or do was based on that other person. Exactly. And so that was a muscle that was unused. It had atrophied. And so I like that, spending time with yourself and just kind of asking yourself these questions and getting to know yourself again can help exercise that muscle a little bit.
Exactly. And one of the things that I love about your work and what I did with myself and what I talk about in my book too is rewriting the narrative. So a lot of times, because it's such a endless cycle, it seems, and you think you're never going to get out and it's never going to get better, you have this sense of kind of doom and hopelessness, like I will never have it, it will never be different.
Right.
And the truth is that we are the stories we tell ourselves, and that part of what's gone is our ability to tell a different story. So when you tell the story that is, you're stating the truth of what is, and that has tremendous value. And then you also can decide, well, if I want a different outcome, what are the things that I need to say to myself that are going to be different?
Right.
So the habits of how we speak to ourselves, for example, I remember thinking, as you said, I couldn't decide what to have for dinner. I remember a moment where I was paralyzed because I was afraid to try to make pancakes because I thought I was going to do it wrong. And I actually wrote a poem about this because I thought, this is not a hard task, and I'm an extremely accomplished person. I graduated with cum laude from a big university and all that stuff.
Right.
Like, how could I be so undone that I can't make pancakes? And really, it was, again, slowing things down and changing the way, the language and the tone of voice I had in my own head. And so that's part of sort of rewriting that narrative to have a different outcome. So if I want to make the pancakes and have them turn out, what are the things I need to do and say to myself from that vision point and work backwards and then take those very small steps? And really, it was about allowing for failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Making it safe to not be perfect.
Yeah, that's so true.
And
because
being kind to ourselves through it.
Yeah. That's afraid of failure. I think that's part of one of the chains that keeps us bound, is because we're afraid we're going to fail. And we're afraid we're going to do something wrong or mess something up. And we've been, playing like whack-a-mole with our lives so often, just putting out fires and we think that if I could just try harder or work harder or do this better, that it will be all okay. And we just need to allow ourselves, okay, I'm going to do it really badly, really poorly. I am going to fail. And it's okay. Telling yourself it's okay. You're just, trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I get it. That's promoted and out in the world. But trying harder and harder to do what you have been doing might not be the right thing. It might be just looking inside and going inward and having that self-compassion and giving yourself that space to fail.
It's so true.
It's okay.
Right. I mean, and the perfectionist trap is really one I think that's very common in emotional abuse in particular, because it's usually we're so, highly effective at being good. Like, yeah, like I can handle all this. And so it keeps you, again, it's another one of those things like compassion that kind of is misused, right? So if we have room to fail and fail in safe ways, that helps us develop that muscle again. So yeah, I burned some pancakes. They weren't perfect. And some of them were kind of lumpy, and my kids were surprisingly forgiving as well. And so setting up safe places to fail, as well as having that language to talk to ourselves differently. So yeah. And yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, just a little bit, another piece of that is, so that the emotional and verbal abuser will use these techniques that then we use on ourselves.
Yeah.
Like that cruel language that has been used to us, we take on using it as a whip. So it's again that perfectionist drive, because of course it becomes almost survival driven. So I really appreciate your identifying that piece, and agree completely.
Yeah. And here's the thing, we mentioned this at the beginning, but it is tough because that perfection or that goodness or that it is our identity. So we've attached ourselves to that identity. So if we are not perfect, if we do burn the pancakes or don't do them right, then our identity is crumbling. However, that's the false identity. So that's why looking inward, slowing things down, writing things out is a way to find what superpowers you have that's not crippling you, a superpower that's not crippling you. And it's in there.
Right.
It really is.
And another wonderful tool for that, along with the writing, is because if you're able to say the dialogue that's happening in your head around that it's not acceptable to fail. First of all, it's hubris, right? Like, as you said, your therapist brought that up, and you're like, yeah, that's kind of like, I'm not God. I can't actually fix that person.
Right.
And so, I'm not God. And that allows me to have failure because I'm human. And it actually opens up your ability to connect with other people again, because we're all messy and imperfect.
Right.
And then I just lost the other thing I was going to say about that.
We just love getting into these conversations. It's really good, really insightful. Yeah.
What was it about the hubris? Yes. When you write it out and see that dialogue, if you were to put that person outside of yourself on a sofa and listen to them, you'd be like, that's ridiculous. What an absurd standard you've set for yourself. And so that process of writing it out or talking it out with someone, taking it out of your own head, is really valuable, where you then get to see your own wisdom and accurate perception of like, oh yeah, that's not correct.
Yeah. One of the things I always say, one of the reasons that I was able to get out is because I talked to I was looking at my kids and saying, oh my goodness, what my kids are at risk of growing up to be in a relationship just like this. And that scared me. And so you can always say, okay, if I were to talk that way to my kids, or if they were to talk that way to themselves, would that be acceptable? No. or a friend. Let's just think, imagine a friend. If you were to say that to a friend, or a friend were to say that, that wouldn't be acceptable. You would take that friend aside and say, listen, that's not good thinking. That's not right thinking. So when you get it out of yourself, I like that. Get it out of yourself and look at it, examine it in the light. It's like, again, getting that out of your head. When it's all rolling around in your head, it gets confused and foggy and things like that. But when you get it out in some way, then you can really see it for what it is. And I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's that part of getting back into the body, whether it's through dance or if you were to draw what that feeling was that you were experiencing, now that super critical voice, I can bet you dollars to donuts that picture would be kind of dark. And you'd be able to go, oh yeah, now that's something that that's a thought I was feeding myself. Probably not what I would do for anybody that I loved. Why would I do that for myself?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. One last question. Can you think of one shift that would help empower somebody? One shift that they can make?
The mind is an incredible ally, and it was used against us. To return it to that, I would say, the label would be a mindset difference. And to me, the process of saying where I was a victim and really like, oh my gosh, like that was a big thing to swallow.
Yeah.
But very important starting place. And yet, and to be able to identify, yes, I was a victim of this dynamic, of this, triangulation, of all of these kind of tactics and emotional and verbal abuse and all these things that kind of affected me profoundly, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Saying it and then knowing that you are not a victim after that. Like you can live beyond that. I would say more than you're being a survivor, that having a thriver mindset is invaluable. To knowing that you actually do have choice. You do have freedom, where you gave it up, not because you gave it up because you were stupid, but it was a way of surviving. And you have that available to you in each present moment. So mindfulness of your own thriver self.
Oh, I love that. Suzanne, you have given us a lot of wisdom today. Where can people find out more about you?
Oh, thank you, Stacy. They could look on my website, SuzanneDudleySchon.com, where CCC Coaching Solutions is. And my book is called Out of the Box, A Journey in and Out of Emotional Captivity, by Christina Dudley. I use a different name for that. That's also a resource, but yes, thank you.
Fabulous. I will link both of those down below.
Thank you. And it was a delight to have this conversation with you. You're
amazing,
doing such beautiful work and bringing it to people, especially in this time of need where it may get worse before it gets better. But talking about this, I think, is so transformative.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you. You too.
See ya.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
My name is Stacy Brookman. Women leverage me to unleash their stories and discover their hard-won wisdom so they can command their personal power and emerge resilient and joyful. Because so many are trapped in a cycle of crazy, depleted emotionally, and live with the scars of emotional abuse and low self-esteem. I help them gain clarity from their life lessons, lean on their hard-won wisdom, and have power to feel confident in themselves again. Will you join me? Click here to do so.